There's a kind of pain the narcissist will never admit to the shame of losing someone they once took for granted. They won't cry in public. They won't apologize. But inside they're trapped in a prison of their own, making one built from regret, ego, and silent self-blame. Welcome back to our channel, where we shine a light on the hidden wounds of narcissistic relationships. If you've ever been hurt by someone who only knew how to love themselves, this video is for you. Because the truth is, you weren't just a victim, you became the lesson they'll never forget. So hit like, subscribe, and stay with us until the end, because healing often begins with the courage to face the truth. There are lessons that don't require words, arguments, or even a clear ending. Some lessons only need a quiet withdrawal, and it's in that silence that the truth begins to speak. Narcissists are not afraid of your anger. They're not scared of your tears, your questions, or your pain. In fact, they're used to emotional reactions because those reactions in their mind confirm that they still have power over you. But what they fear the most, what they never saw coming, is your silence. When you stop speaking, stop explaining, stop defending yourself, it's not just withdrawal. It's the collapse of the power they thought they had. And from that moment on, something begins to unfold. They no longer have you to manipulate. No one left to mirror back the image of themselves they tried so hard to maintain. They begin to feel empty, and that emptiness isn't just from your absence. It's from the presence you once held so deeply, so truthfully. A narcissist lives in the illusion of superiority, that they're special, irreplaceable, entitled to love, forgiveness, and return. To them, you were one of many. Replaceable, not essential. But when you go quiet, there's no reaction. No emotional proof that they still matter. And that's when shame creeps in, the one emotion narcissists run from, deny, and bury. The truth is, they don't immediately regret losing you. At first, they feel free. They might even pretend they're better off. They jump into new connections, chase new attention, paint a picture of thriving. But deep inside, there's a void they can't quite explain. A discomfort that lingers. A subtle ache that won't go away. That's the lesson you left behind. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need closure through a final dramatic confrontation. Because the deepest lessons don't come from shouting, they come from the silence after someone who truly loved you walks away. The narcissist becomes haunted not because they loved you so deeply, but because you were the last person who truly saw them, both the good and the dark. And when you're no longer there, they lose the one mirror that reflected their idealized self. There's no one left to appease them. No one left to validate the stories they told themselves. And in that void, they're forced to face what they never wanted to see, themselves raw, flawed, and utterly alone. Your silence becomes a confrontation, not with you, but with their own truth. That's why they can't forget you, not because of love, but because you were the one person who left a lesson they cannot escape. When you walked away in silence, the narcissist didn't immediately fall apart. In fact, they often leave with a sense of superiority, believing they've freed themselves from a connection that no longer served their ego. To them, losing someone is just a transition. There will always be someone else, a new face, a new thrill, a new source of validation. They paint a world where you are no longer important. They smile. They post. They flaunt. They may even jump into a new relationship quickly, not because they've moved on, but because they're desperately trying to prove to themselves that you were never worth missing. But then, the crowd quiets. The messages slow down. The excitement of someone new fades. And suddenly the silence you left behind begins to echo. Not loudly, not chaotically, but in a haunting way they can't ignore. A silence no one else can fill. They start to realize your presence was different. You didn't just listen, you heard the things they didn't say. You didn't just love them, you loved the parts of them they hadn't yet accepted. Through you, they once saw the possibility of being fully understood without having to pretend. And in losing that, they also lost the most authentic connection they ever had. Now the shame they buried starts to surface. They won't say it, their ego won't allow that, but they feel it. Every time a new person fails to get them the way you did. Every time they tell an old story, and no one listens the way you once did. Every time they reach for stability and find only surface-level affection. And then they come to face their worst fear: you are irreplaceable. They may try to replicate your role, but they can't recreate the energy you brought, the peace, the trust, the depth. Because what you gave didn't come from charm or performance, it came from genuine presence and an open heart. It's here the lesson really begins to weigh on them. No one had to teach it. No one punished them. No one pointed fingers. It's just life started reflecting back the truth they once ignored. They miss you not in a romanticized way, but in a painful awareness that they threw away something rare, something they'll never be worthy of again. And the most painful truth: Even if they wanted to fix it, even if they tried to come back, the version of you who once stood by their side no longer exists. You've changed. You've grown. You've healed from the wound they left behind. They didn't just lose you, they lost their one chance to become a better version of themselves. A narcissist cannot truly heal not because they lack the ability, but because they refuse to face who they really are. Healing requires honesty. It takes courage to look back and say, I hurt someone, to acknowledge one's own flaws, to take responsibility. But for a narcissist, truth is the greatest threat to the ego. And when given a choice between healing through truth or protecting their illusion, they will almost always choose the illusion. That's why when you go silent, you're not just walking away from the relationship. You are cutting off the emotional supply they depended on to maintain their sense of superiority. You no longer react. You no longer chase. You no longer show up to carry the emotional weight they silently placed on your shoulders. And that leaves them lost. With no one left to blame, they begin to hear a voice they've tried to suppress for years. The voice of their own conscience, a voice they drowned out with distractions, fleeting pleasures, and self-deception. But now, in the silence, everything else fades, and only the truth remains. They won't admit they miss you. They won't post about their regret. But your absence is everywhere. In the emptiness they can't describe. In the disconnect they feel while lying next to someone new. In the moments where they are loved, yet still feel profoundly alone. In every failed attempt to be understood. And they begin to understand. You weren't just a partner. You were the embodiment of truth in their life, someone who reflected back the parts of them they were most afraid to see. And that's why your silence became their punishment. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty. It was simply you stepping back, no longer willing to carry what never belonged to you. You returned responsibility to its rightful owner, and that's something a narcissist never wanted to hold. And from that moment they began living with the real consequence. No one tolerates their emotional volatility like you once did. No one believes their empty promises the way you did. No one stays long enough for them to sabotage again. Your silence is the first real boundary they've ever encountered. And that boundary doesn't just confuse or frustrate them, it shames them. But the shame doesn't erupt. It simmers. It creeps in at 2 a.m. when they can't sleep. It stares back at them in the mirror when they realize there's no one left to blame. It strikes when someone mentions your name and they remember, deep down, that you were the last person who still believed they could become something more. Leaving a narcissist doesn't mark the end of a relationship. It marks the beginning of your healing journey, the journey back to yourself, to the parts of you that were lost while trying to hold together something that was never healthy. Narcissists rarely let go quietly. They may come back not because they've truly changed, but because they've lost control. They might reach out suddenly, acting casual. They may even seem remorseful, promising transformation. But here's what you must understand. Regret is not the same as growth. And the guilt you feel after leaving may not be love, it might be emotional confusion. The after effect of long-term manipulation. That's why the most important thing you can do now is protect the peace you fought so hard to reclaim. To do that, you'll need 3 things. 1. Trust the intuition that helped you walk away. You didn't leave because you were weak. You left because your inner voice knew you were being drained. And that intuition deserves your respect, not your doubt. Whenever you feel pulled back, remember the emotional exhaustion, the self-blame, the second-guessing that haunted you while you were still in that relationship. That memory is your shield, your protection from being drawn back into a place that nearly broke you. 2. Don't mistake their silence for transformation. A narcissist may disappear for a while, then return looking different, quieter, more thoughtful, maybe even humble. But silence doesn't equal healing. Sometimes, silence is just the calm before the next manipulation. They know how to play on your compassion. They know your emotional soft spots. But you must remember, they didn't love you. They loved being loved by you. And now that it's gone, they want access, not reconciliation. 3. You're not obligated to be the kind one anymore. One of the biggest traps that pulls people back is guilt. You might think, what if they're really hurting? Or am I being too cold? But here's the truth, you were kind enough. You forgave, you waited, you tried to understand. Now, kindness means being good to yourself, and that includes walking away from people who refuse to grow. You didn't leave to punish them. You left to live. And your life doesn't need to be explained, justified, or approved by someone who used your empathy against you. Healing doesn't come when they apologize. Healing begins when you no longer need them to. It starts when you stop rewriting the story, stop blaming yourself for loving too hard, and begin asking, how can I love myself better today? Peace isn't a destination. It's a choice you make every single day. Choosing not to reply when they message at 2 a.m. Choosing not to stalk their social media. Choosing not to relive the good memories that came wrapped in pain. And slowly you begin to realize, you don't need them to understand you. You don't need them to see your worth. You just need you. Not everyone becomes a lesson in someone's life. Some people pass through quietly, leaving little behind. But some like you leave a mark that never fades. Not because you caused pain, but because you once loved with a sincerity so rare, it couldn't be replaced. And that love, after you walked away, became an unspoken standard, something the narcissist can never recreate with their shallow future connections. You don't have to punish them. You don't have to expose them. You don't have to prove anything. Because your absence alone left a void they cannot fill. And that emptiness doesn't come from you. It comes from the part of themselves they once touched when they were with you. The version of them that could have grown, if only they had chosen to. Narcissists don't fear being left. They fear being forgotten. And when you walked away without anger, without begging, without chasing, you didn't just withdraw your love. You withdrew the mirror you once held up for them. You stopped being the audience to their performance. You stopped being the reflection they relied on to feel significant. You became the first person to say, "I will not stay where truth is not welcomed." And that's the lesson they'll never forget. You became a symbol not of perfection but of authenticity, of something they once had and lost. Every time they feel misunderstood, every time the next relationship collapses under its own weight, every time they look into someone's eyes and realize no one sees them the way you did, your presence echoes. Not because you were the one, but because you were the real one. They don't miss your looks or your actions. They miss the way you showed up, the way you listened with your whole heart, the way you held firm boundaries with softness, the way you were honest, consistent, grounded, and kind all at once. And then they realize, you weren't just a former partner. You were the mirror of everything they refused to face. You were an invitation into truth, but they declined. They ran. They rejected it. And when you left with grace, not vengeance, they were left with nothing but their unfiltered reflection. So how do you become the lesson they never forget? Not through hatred, not by proving you've won, but by living truthfully, by living a life where you no longer deny your vulnerability, by keeping strong boundaries without losing your compassion, by no longer needing to earn your worth because you know who you are, by building a life no longer shaped by their opinions or approval. Because when you live in your truth, you don't just heal yourself, you become the awakening they never saw coming. In the end, what remains between you and the narcissist is a single, undeniable thing: the difference. They remain trapped, circling in loops of denial, regret, performative healing, and quiet loneliness. You, on the other hand, have stepped out, not without pain, but with the courage to face it, feel it, and move through it. And that's something they were never willing to do. Narcissists live through image. They build a false self, flawless, invulnerable, never wrong, and cling to it like armor. They can't bear the feeling of guilt. They see remorse as weakness. They treat emotional accountability like a threat. So when you walked away with silence instead of chaos, they lost their grip on control and fell into an internal confusion they were never equipped to handle. They can't face the truth, that they were once loved unconditionally and they destroyed it, that they were given a chance and they wasted it, that they feel shame but have no idea how to carry it with integrity. So they run. They pretend they're fine. They seek replacements. They build a new story, but it's hollow. Because no matter how polished the image is, it lacks the one thing only real growth can offer: depth. Meanwhile, you, the one who was hurt, became the strongest. Not because you didn't suffer, but because you didn't run from the suffering. You allowed yourself to cry. You sat with the pain, even when it burned. You forgave not for them, but for your own peace. You began learning how to love yourself not through their eyes, but through your own. And somewhere in that journey, you stopped being the person they once knew. You no longer seek validation. You no longer need closure. You no longer crave apology. Because you've turned the page. Why will they never forget you? Because you are the milestone of a moment they destroyed. You were the last to love without conditions, the last to wait with hope, the last to see their potential, not to excuse it, but to invite it forward. And when you walked away quietly, calmly, with dignity, you left behind stillness, the one thing a narcissist cannot endure. In that stillness, they were left alone with the truth that they weren't ready, the truth that they couldn't hold on to something real, the truth that they encountered someone rare and lost them forever. And you, where are you going? You're rising. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Your existence, your peace, your truth is the lesson. And the lesson. And that lesson will echo in every shallow connection they chase after. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real. And that's something they never had the courage to be. You don't need to defeat anyone. You don't need their regret or their admission of guilt to heal. The moment you chose silence, walked away, and continued living in your truth, you already rose above. And if there's one thing to remember, it's this. You're unforgettable not because you tried to be remembered, but because you were real. People can replace relationships, but a connection rooted in soul, kindness, and depth is never replicated. They will live with their choice, and you keep living with the peace you chose. If this video spoke to you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Click like and share it with someone who may need to hear this today. And if you're walking your own healing path, subscribe to the channel. We're here to walk this journey together, step by step, stronger, truer, and freer.